Well, hello, writers. Welcome to episode number 68, I think. I think that's what it is, of How Do You Write? I'm Rachael Herron, and I am so excited that you're here with me today. I know I say that every week. It's not planned. It's just what comes out of my mouth. But this week's show is Antonia Murphy, and believe me, you want to stay tuned to this whole episode. She's fascinating, delightful. She's a local girl from my area who has moved to New Zealand, my other area. So it was just a joy to talk to her about this memoir that she's written. It is a little bit different format because I recorded this for my memoir class. So the questions are a little bit different, which is actually really interesting for you guys anyway. All writing advice is always applicable across the board, and she's just delightful, so you are going to enjoy. And just a quick catch up on my end. Things have been rolling smartly along. If you can hear a little feedback in the background, I swear every dog in the neighborhood is in my office chewing on their bones. There's like 72 in here. I apologize for that. But hey, real life. Yeah, things are rolling along. Everything is I'm pushing things off my plate, things that have been on my plate for a very long time. I am finally getting off my plate, and this feels really good to me. And I was just reminded earlier today that this has happened to me before. I feel like I'm just pushing through mud, and I do that for months and months and months and months at a time. But the fact is, I'm continuously producing. So at some point, all those books kind of start to take shape and show up. I think it was not last year, maybe the year before. I had five books come out that year. It wasn't planned, and the year before that there were none. It's just that the way publishing cycles work, things like that. This year I've published only 2. Next year I predict there will be more. So just by the way that everything is working, a very, very clever person, a clever writer, would obviously orchestrate these things so that your books are released at sensible time frames. It's all scheduled out, and I am sensible in many ways, but time management is not one of my strong suits, so I work on it very, very hard. But I am excited that things are moving out of the way, and I'm seeing the glimmers of new projects in my future, which I really, really enjoy thinking about. And I'm only sharing this with you, but I had this brainwave of the next collection of essays that I want to write, my next memoir. I'm pulling together right now the Patreon essays on creativity, which have been so exciting to write. I'm not going too far away from that idea. These will still be essays that I write for my Patreon supporters that are then collected into a book after a year. But the idea I have for next year's book excites me so much. It is actually not even something I am sure I'll be able to pull off because there is a licensing right that I would need to get around. I know I can only really be vague about this, but as soon as I am able to talk about this, if this works, if it gets off the ground, which I really hope it does, you will also be the first to know, because I think you will recognize the parties involved, and it's just going to be a really, really fun way for me to continue writing essays about living the creative life. So to that point, because we're already on the topic, I want to thank new patrons. I have new patrons, Melanie Levy and Tammy Brightweiser. Thank you so much for supporting me. If anybody wants to support me on Patreon, you get those essays. You get all the back essays. It's a full book right now. You can grab for free. Anybody who is a patron, no matter what books I put out of those essays, you always get a copy of it at the end as well as while I'm writing. And if you pledge at the $3 an essay level, which is the most popular level, you get texts from me a couple times a week. You can respond back. I respond back to you. It's super fun. And also your patronage at any level, even if it's just a quarter an episode, $1 a month, it gets you the satisfaction that you are truly a patron of the arts in the old-fashioned way. And that is so awesome. And I appreciate you and thank you mightily and heartily. What other news do I have? Oh, I kind of have a little bit of really fun news. In May 5th and 6th, that weekend, I'm going to be in Chicago at the Sell More Books show. I think it's official. I think we could talk about it. I believe that this is true. But the Sell More Books guys, Jim Kukral and Brian Cohen, are putting on this what is shaping up to be a fantastic conference in Chicago. They're doing this with Zach Bohannon and my boy Jay Thorne. So it's going to be the first time that my other podcast, The Pedal to the Metal, which I co-host with Jay Thorne. And if you like things that are funny and awesome and about writing, you should go start at the beginning with that podcast because we have fun and it's a very short format podcast. But basically the premise behind The Pedal to the Metal is moving from the day job to the dream job. And we have both now progressed to the dream job. I've been doing this for I guess it's about a year and a half, a little bit more than that. And Jay has been full-time for about 4 or 5 months. So we talk about doing this job. And I love that guy, and we've never met in person. So our first meeting will be in Chicago at the Sell More Books conference. So that's going to be really fun, and we're going to record a live episode of the Pedal to the Metal there. So you should come. You should really, really come. The names that are going to be speaking that I am hearing are going to be there. I will not reveal them because I don't know if I'm allowed to, but they're good names. They're big names. These are people who are moving in the industry who know what is going on in traditional and indie worlds. So please come to Chicago. That's going to be fun. Anything else? No, I've just been teaching like crazy and excited about new ideas. And this Sunday, I must say, is the night of Writing Dangerously, which is the gala for National Novel Writing Month. It raises funds for the Young Writers Program, and basically it's in the Julia Cameron Ballroom in San Francisco. You have to raise a certain amount of money to go. It's all a donation for the Young Writers Program. And it's like the prom of our people, you guys. In the middle of the room, in the middle of the ballroom, there is a candy fountain, basically just covered with all the kinds of candy you could want. There's coffee everywhere you look. There's electricity beneath every table so you can plug your computer in. There's an open bar, which has been detrimental to my word count a couple of years, but hopefully it won't be this year. And it's just a fantastic group of people who get very dressed up in our noir gear and go to this incredible night. So I'm actually speaking at it with my friend Shannon Monroe, and that's going to be really fun. So if you hear this before Sunday and you are at the night of Writing Dangerously, come hear us talk. And I will tell you how it went. How it goes next week. However, I already know it's going to be fabulous because it really is one of my favorite nights of all. It's this ball, really, where a bunch of nerds, all of us nerds, go there and just geek out and write a lot of words fueled by caffeine, sugar, and perhaps alcohol. It's pretty phenomenal. There's a dinner too, but like, who cares? Nobody notices the dinner after all that awesome stuff. There's swag bags, so I'm very grateful to get to go. And so that'll be fun. And I have rambled long enough. Please enjoy the interview with Antonia. I know that I really enjoyed talking to her, and I have loved her first memoir. I can't wait to see her next. Meantime, I wish you all very happy writing and get some good words on the page. Talk soon. All right. Well, you guys, I could not be more pleased to be here today with Antonia Murphy. Hi, Antonia.
Hi.
Hey there. Let me give you a little bit of an introduction. Antonia Murphy is the author of Dirty Chick, Adventures of an Unlikely Farmer from Gotham Penguin, and founder and director of The Batch, an ethical escort agency in Whangarei, New Zealand. San Francisco native, she now lives on a small New Zealand farm with her partner Patrice and their combined brood of 6 kids. Welcome to the
Thank you
show.
so much.
This is
Thanks for
doing,
reaching out.
of course, this is doing dual duty on my podcast and also for my memoir class at Stanford. And I reached out to you last week when I was in the airport going somewhere to a conference, and I was in the middle of your book, and I was just obsessed. I had to have you on the show. I can't remember the last time a memoir has captivated me so quickly and has made me laugh so hard.
Oh, how
And
great.
I can't remember if I told you, but like if you say the word pastoral memoir to me, I am just in. I am all about it. And for listeners who might not know what that is, it's life on a farm. It's talking about, uprooting and going to live somewhere else and buying some chickens and some cows. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got to New Zealand and where you ended up now?
Well, I got to New Zealand on a sailboat.
Which I love.
I was, we were basically fleeing the Bush regime in 2008. It's a little bit funny to look back now and think that I was unhappy with the political climate in the States in 2008.
Right. Yeah.
But that's why I left the United States. I actually left in 2005 with my then husband, Peter.
Mm-hmm.
And we sailed around Central America and then took off and sailed across to New Zealand and arrived in '08 and made a pretty great life here. It's a pretty nice lifestyle.
That's fantastic. How did you get interested in memoir? Was this something that was on your radar or something to do?
No, I rediscovered how much I enjoyed writing while on that sailing trip. I had loved it as a young girl and came very close to getting published with a book I wrote when I was 15. And it created this kind of hothouse of expectations so that when that book was not published, I sort of shoved that dream down and didn't go back to it for many years.
But you were 15.
Yeah, but it seemed like it was, I got this big time literary agent in London and it seemed like it was really going to happen. And when it didn't, it felt like a giant failure. So I sort of shoved writing to the side for a number of years. And then while we were sailing, I started blogging about ridiculous things that happened on board. And I loved, writing about the sort of imperfect reality of sailing, even though people think that it's this tropical fantasy. You're often dealing with things like plumbing problems and the smell of your own poop and trying to find a hardware store in Mexico in 100-degree heat when you don't speak Spanish. And I started making people laugh with that stuff. And I started hearing from people about how much they enjoyed my writing. And I started enjoying it again. And so that's when I rediscovered writing and started doing it seriously. And that was in '05, '06. And I didn't sell the memoir until 2013. So there's a number of years back into it before it actually started making some money.
Yeah, exactly. I find asking questions about humor particularly irritating. So bear with me. Because you are so damn funny. Like, you are unfathomably funny. Is that just something that comes out of you, or is that something that you actually craft to go back and add in or up the ante of humor?
Both. I think I've always had a very Black sense of humor. It sort of runs on my mother's side of the family. But also, when I write something that's intended to be humorous, after I create the first draft, in the process of editing, I actually read it out loud to myself. And it's in hearing it and hearing the rhythm of it and how the jokes fall that I can tell if it's funny or if it's just strained or trying too hard. And that's really helped me. And I think it also helped the success of the audiobook because I think the book reads out loud really well as a result.
Did you read it out loud or did they hire a narrator? They
wanted to hire a narrator, but I pushed really hard and I got to read it out loud.
Awesome. What was that experience like? I've never done that.
It was so cool. I had lived in New York for a number of years in college and then afterwards as a struggling young person. And I always felt like I was sort of outside of the big glamorous dream of New York looking in, and to fly into New York to actually read my own book in a professional studio at Audible
and put on the headphones and
a part of it all happening. It was so exciting, and there's such an amazing team there. It was lots of fun.
That's super cool. Now, when you were putting together the memoir, at what point did you know this is going to be a memoir that I'm going to attempt to sell?
At what point did I know what, sorry?
That this was going to be a memoir that you were going to try to sell as a book.
Well, it's funny because, I told you that I rediscovered writing in '05 and started writing seriously and cranked out a young adult novel and a travel memoir about New Zealand, neither of which sold.
Wow.
I got my literary agent on the strength of the New Zealand memoir.
Mm-hmm.
But then when it came time to write what became Dirty Chick, it was actually an idea I had in the shower. And I just jotted off this idea to my literary agent that morning, saying, isn't it hilarious that people think artisan farming is this pastoral fantasy when the reality involves maggots and animal shit and all this hard work and gross things coming out of goats. And she said, that's hilarious. Let's put that together in a proposal. So we actually sold the memoir on the basis with the proposal. I didn't write it till I knew I had a contract.
Oh, awesome. That's really interesting. So, speaking of things coming out of goats, I can't remember if it was a goat or a sheep that something was coming out of in the very first page, I believe. And it was incredibly gross and incredibly intense. And that was the moment in which I just signed up for everything you've ever done. Like, I was your newest, biggest fan. There's a particular person who wants to read about what comes out of a goat. And I'm one of those people.
Yeah, well, she gave birth to these cute little babies. And then she proceeded to eat her own placenta. Like, it was so special and pure, totally disgusting at the same time, which is the foundation of what makes it funny, I think.
Exactly. So when you were writing the memoir, and this is particularly, I'm asking this for my memoir class, how did you go about crafting the arc, or did you? Is it just something that is it something that you planned ahead of time, or
No,
just
not
wrote
at all.
towards? Okay, so it's more.
I sold the proposal. Initially, I was going to call it How Your Artisan Farm Can Gross You Out and Kill You. And I envisioned it more as a series of vignettes, funny vignettes, like one about goats, one about vegetable farming, one about baby cows. But then, and this was something I discovered in the process of selling my first book, is that it's my understanding that usually nonfiction is sold on the proposal. Mm-hmm. And the acquiring editors really like to be a part of the creation of the book. And it's fantastic if you can open your mind to that, because these are really smart people who have devoted their lives to literature, and by and large, they're being extremely underpaid to do it. And so they have really great ideas, and if you're lucky. And my editor in Australia at Text, Michael Hayward, he got on the phone with me and he said, look, I see this as much more than just a book of vignettes. Have you read A Year in Provence? Mm-hmm. Because they were able to take a series of funny things that happened to them while renovating their house in France and turn it into a narrative that drew the reader along into this experience. And that's what I think you should do. And so that's when we decided to take it more in the direction of a whole narrative arc. I think it ends up spanning about a year. Yeah, in our first year in the countryside.
That's interesting you say that, because I hadn't thought about Peter Mayle and those books for a really long time. And A Year in Provence actually came up while I was reading it. It does have kind of that echo and that beautiful way of drawing us through time, but still keeping us really, really grounded in the really disgusting moment. It's not, and I'm saying disgusting. The book is not disgusting. It is just hilarious. It's just hilarious and very, very true. How do you handle truthfulness in memoir and the people around you? I know this is the perennial question, but how do you personally handle it?
Well, in this case, it was particularly interesting, and it created a crisis sort of at the end of the writing process. What happened was, when I sold the book, the way that I had started to write my humor, short stories, and blog posts is I would take what could be a seemingly innocuous situation, and I would exaggerate it to the point of absurdity to make something funny. Mm-hmm. And so one of the, when you make a proposal, you have a couple of sample chapters in there. And one of the sample chapters that I sold it with involved how cute baby lambs are. And in my in the sample chapter, I took it to the extreme. So I implied that the baby lambs had actually become a drug, and that I was actually possibly performing sex acts with these baby lambs. And it was so absurd. It was obviously false.
Right.
And it was funny. And the editors loved it. And so at the beginning of the writing narration? Does everything need to be completely factually correct, or can you exaggerate for humorous effect? And the Australians were pushing for no, 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 exaggerate. It's tons of fun. No idiot is actually going to think that she is, performing sex acts on a lamb. And the Americans were more cautious. And in the end, my American editor said, fine, look, bottom line, just go in the direction that you think is funny. So I wrote the book. Then when I turned in the draft, there were a few wildly exaggerated vignettes in it. And including at the end, there was this like big showdown with the farmer and two of the goats, and somebody jumped over his four-wheeler or something, and it was made up. And I can't remember at what point in an exchange I alluded to the fact that was made up. I said, like, of course, that's exaggerated. And my American editor said, what? It has to be factually correct or we're in big trouble. She said, you need to give me a table of exactly which items in this memoir are at all exaggerated or not true to life. And I was like, whoa. And honestly, I almost lost the U.S. contract over it because I felt really blindsided by that. And I thought I was misled in the beginning about what I could and couldn't do. And my agency had to get on the phone and like sort of talk me down off the ledge because I went into this artistic temper tantrum of, fine, I'll just publish in Australia then. The hell with the Americans. And my literary agent was like, easy now. That's a much bigger contract than the Australian contract. Let's see if we can work with them. And so I ended up going back and really rewriting those sections so that it was all within the realm of what could legally be construed as nonfiction in the United States. And then at the very end, I was basically deposed by a lawyer from Penguin over Skype.
Holy crap.
Who went through different points that they still thought might not be factually correct to ensure that they were. And it was a real wake-up call. And I guess what I took away from it is that there were a couple of memoirs in the not-too-distant past. Is it James Frey, A Million Little Pieces? Mm-hmm. And then one about the cups of tea in Nepal.
3 cups of tea. Yeah.
Yeah. Both of those, for some reason, Frey I can see more so than the cups of tea, but they resulted in lawsuits about factual errors. And I guess the 3 cups of tea, what happened is that people were donating that ended up to not exist or had been misrepresented. And so there were lawsuits. And so apparently the American publishing industry was really running scared about anything that could create a lawsuit. So that a very long answer to your question. That's how I ended up dealing with truthfulness, and it was a real wake up call because I didn't see why a movie was allowed to begin with based on a true story, right, and a book was not. But it's a much harder line in nonfiction, certainly out of the United States.
That's so interesting. I hadn't thought about it being different country to country.
Oh, yeah.
But it definitely is. And who's the most libelous nation on earth? It's the United States. Of course, they're running scared. But I want to reassure my students, don't worry about this yet. Worry about this later.
Yeah. And, nobody ever threatened to take away the contract from me. It was I who went into this fit of artistic pique. And, in retrospect, I think I could have been a little bit more grown up about it, but it's all part of the learning process, And
the delicious thing about humor is when it is exaggerated. I mean, think about David Sedaris. Think about any of the greats who do exaggerate to that perfect effect, and we buy into it, and we love it, and we want more of it.
Well, Michael at Tex brought up Mark Twain, who things like. Yeah, is it a Connecticut a Yankee in King Arthur's court? I think he may have presented that as, these are things that really happened to me, dear reader.
Yep. Oh, wow. I'm really glad that you shared that. What is your writing process like? What is your daily writing process like?
Ass in chair. I had those words printed out above my desk. And basically there's hard days and there's easy days, but I force myself to treat it like a job, and I am in that chair by 9:30, and I don't get out of that chair until I've sat there for a good 3 hours, or I have a good chunk of writing done. Sometimes it takes me half an hour to get my head focused. Sometimes I sit there that whole time and I don't get anything worthwhile completed, but I find that just the process of being there, the gears are turning in my head. And even if what I've written that day is garbage, my head will keep turning it over so that the following day when I get back to that writing chair, I have a much more productive day.
And do you write there where you're sitting? Are you at home when you write, or do you go out?
No, totally at home. I just need I have written in a library, but I need quiet, so I will go with a pair of those giant plastic earmuffs that people use to mow their lawns, and I sit there like a crazy person, writing with my earmuffs on.
That's awesome. I also love when I'm one of those writers that makes faces in public when I'm writing. You know, when I'm thinking about things, I'm sure I'm doing that with my earmuffs on, and it amuses me to think of.
To myself because I'm reading out loud to myself, so that's even more sexy.
Speaking of sexy, can you please tell us about the brothel? Because wait, let me back this up. I'm reading your book. I go to your website and I see the word brothel and I think, well, that must mean something different. I don't understand. And I clicked on it, and it does indeed. You are a madam now, and I have received your assurance that you're writing about it. Thank God, because I can't wait to read this. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, absolutely. Well, not to disillusion your students, but writing, except in select cases, doesn't pay all the bills. So, I was really excited to get the deal that I got from Gotham Penguin, and that payment, after your literary agent takes their cut and the government takes their cut, and it is spaced out over about a year and a half, because you get a third when you sign, a third when you turn in the manuscript, and a third when the book is published. At least in my case, that was the deal, and I understand that's quite common. In the end of the day, it's lovely pocket money, right? So I needed a job, basically. I didn't want a job. I wanted to start a business. And since we had arrived in New Zealand, I was really intrigued that sex work was completely decriminalized here. So in some countries, for example, in Australia and Europe, it is legalized, which means that it is not a crime, but it is heavily regulated by the government. Here it is treated like work like any other work. So they basically leave you alone to get on with it. So in researching this, the first thing I did was nerd out and try to learn as much as I could about it and make contacts with other people in the industry. And I reached out to the woman who runs the most famous escort agency in New Zealand called Funhouse in Wellington. And I said, can this be done in a way that is supportive to women and protects their emotional well-being and human rights? And she said, absolutely. She said, it's not the way to make the most money, but if you want to do it that way, I'm the only person in this country who can teach you how to do it. So I went down and interned with her for 2 weeks. Yeah, and it was incredible. Far from what I had thought about sex work and what I think most people who don't have direct experience with it think. These women were not addicted to drugs. They were not exploited. They were not downtrodden in any way. If anything, it reminded me of when I was on the crew team at Columbia. It was like a women's sports team of girls who were like, hell yeah, let's go,
I love that.
They were gorgeous young women who came in. They worked for an hour, made $200, and went back to graduate school or to their artistic careers or whatever it is they were doing in their life. And in many cases, they really enjoyed the sex. And they said, I don't need a boyfriend. I'm putting away money for travel, for whatever it is they were doing. And it was just really awesome. And I searched my heart, as I still continue to do, for, am I missing something? Is there something secretly sexist and exploitative that I am not getting here? And I just cannot find it. And the bottom line is that in our culture today, many young people, certainly in the wealthy Western countries, their sex lives are already quite casual on Tinder, hookups with people they hardly know.
Sure.
Except the girls are having sex for free with guys who they don't know and who often aren't very good in bed. And so the women who come and work for me, they end up saying things like, I can't believe I was doing this on Tinder for free. Obviously, I should be getting paid for it. So that's what we do. And I don't call it a brothel any longer. I call it a feminist escort agency. So
I like
the
that.
difference is that in a brothel, generally speaking, the ladies are all like in their underwear in a room, and a guy goes in and says, "You, I'll take you," which is fundamentally kind of gross.
Mm-hmm.
Our escort agency, there are photos of the ladies' bodies, basically online with no faces and no distinguishing marks. The men ring us up. They need to be polite and respectful. They make an arrangement with a lady. They have to follow a series of instructions. We tell them where to go. There's a beautiful apartment where a lady greets them in a elegant dress, offers him a drink. The whole thing is a much more human experience, much more like a date with a girlfriend. And look, I have women working for me who most of them are single mothers. Some of them are paying down student debt. One most recently quit her nursing job because she was earning so little, and she's doing so much better at the batch. Mm-hmm. So it's really fascinating to me. I over the course of this past year, I've become increasingly radicalized. I'm not strapping bombs to myself or anything, but I increasingly feel like, at least in the situation where these women are in a wealthy Western democracy, where we're not dealing with issues of illegal immigration or drug addiction or certainly human trafficking, what we're dealing with is young women who are quite capable of making their own choices. This is an issue of right to work. This is a human rights issue of right to work and women having the right to monetize their own sexual services. There's absolutely no reason why we should be allowed to give away sex, but we're not allowed to charge for it.
I love that.
The only reason, frankly, is that I think there is a secret fear in the patriarchy that if the women figure out they can charge for it, they'll all start charging for it.
I would like you to radicalize the world that way. And I cannot wait to read this book. I do have one specific question, just geographically, because I'm familiar with the area. Is it Auckland and North, or is the batch out in Whangarei, or is it, because I know it's a little bit less populated out where you are, and I wonder how that works.
Whangarei is 2 hours north of Auckland. We're the only professional agency north of Auckland, okay. So we get guys driving to see us for an hour or more. Okay. But yeah, there's definitely, it's never going to be huge as it could be in Auckland or Wellington. But having said that, in some ways we're making more of an impact because the economy here is such that unless you have a really valued qualification, like you're a surgeon or a lawyer, the jobs that are available, certainly to young women, are basically minimum wage. And so what we offer, they're able to make 10, 11 times that and more. So it really changes their lives. I mean, and many of them, they are just socking that money away and putting it in a safe, and they are going to use it to invest, to buy property. It's changing lives.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. I absolutely love it. And I really mean it when I say I cannot wait to read this book. It's going to be, whenever it comes out, it's going to be amazing.
Thank you. Interesting you say that. I have yet to get a negative response from a woman about this. Wow. Most women, I mean, sometimes people are unsure when they first hear about it. They're like, ooh, doesn't that objectify women? Isn't that... But then when I explain to them, every woman I've spoken to, their response is, hell yes. It may not be everyone. Women should have the choice.
Mm-hmm. And I'm from the Bay Area, where we had the first, unionized, the Lusty Lady in San Francisco. I don't know if you remember that, but
I'm familiar with Margot St. James and the Chuck Out Your Old Tired Ethics, the Coyote group.
Yeah.
What is Jesse Lane?
The Lusty Lady was it was a strip joint that was unionized. I think it was the first and maybe the only, and now it's out. And it was a co-op. It was women owned. So it was really pivotal in changes in sex work, but we're still the puritanical United States, and we're still remaining in that. We are not New Zealand. And I have to say that I mentioned to you that I have dual citizenship, and we are always thinking about fleeing, especially now. I can't believe that we haven't done it yet, but my wife and I are always it's always on the front burner. We've got family stuff that keeps us here, but other than that.
Yeah, I mean, I miss the United States. It's hard to immigrate. Yeah. And every time I come back, I'm homesick. for sure.
Yeah.
But the longer I'm away, the more some things like healthcare and gun control and Puritanism seem just insane.
Yeah.
They seem insane.
Yeah. Well, what an absolute treat it has been to talk to you. One more thing I would like to ask you. If you were going to tell a brand new memoir writer just starting one piece of advice that you wish you had been given, do you have anything like that to share?
That I wish I had been given at the start. I think it's important to remember that even though it's, this goes back to the issue of truth. And even though you may be telling facts, you are telling select facts. And in telling those select facts, you are creating a character, which is you in the book. It's not the same as you in real life. And so once the memoir is out there, people will contact you, and often it's really lovely and the book has meant a lot to them, but they often feel like they know you because you have shared yourself in the book, and that can lead people to say things that seem weirdly intimate, or they may ask you really personal questions, and then you think about it and you reply and they never get back to you, and it can hurt your feelings, actually. And when you're answering questions about your personal life and your family on the radio or in media, it can feel weirdly raw and exposed. And I think it's just important to treat it like a job and remember you're answering questions about this character that you created in a book.
I love that.
Not about your innermost self.
That makes perfect sense. And it is all about what we choose to present and what we choose to hold back. Mm-hmm. And we get to make those choices. So I believe that you are a woman all about choice. So.
Well, I'm from the freaky San Francisco Bay Area.
I know you are. Thank you so much for your time. I can't thank you more. Please go back to enjoying your day and doing awesome things. Thanks,
all right,
Antonia.
Well, all the best. Okay. I'd love to hear how it goes with your class.
I will let you know. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.